All right, let's dive right into today's explainer. We are looking at a huge 300,000-year-old evolutionary mystery. How exactly did our ancient ancestors manage to keep the most helpless infants on the planet alive? Honestly, the way early humans solved this massive problem challenges pretty much everything we think we know about parenting, about the structure of the family, and even what the human body was biologically designed to do.
To really wrap our heads around this, we have to start by completely resetting our modern perspective. Picture this. Tonight, millions of parents will put their child to bed in a room of their own. A nice crib, soft sheets, maybe a baby monitor glowing in the corner, the door closed, and the house perfectly quiet. But here's the crazy part. For 99.9% of human history, that exact scenario, a baby sleeping completely alone in a room, meant that baby would literally be dead by morning. In the Paleolithic night, there were no cribs, there were no monitors, and there certainly weren't any pediatricians. There was just the cold, the dark, and hungry predators that could smell a newborn from a quarter-mile away. For over 300,000 years, an infant left alone was an infant that just didn't survive.
So, that begs the question, why on earth are human babies so incredibly vulnerable in the first place? Think about it. A newborn horse can stand up and walk within hours. A newborn chimpanzee grips its mother's fur and holds on for dear life from the very first minute. But a newborn human? It can't even hold up its own head. It can't walk for a year. It's totally defenseless. Well, the reason for this extreme helplessness comes down to a really harsh evolutionary deal we struck. We call it the big brain trade-off. We acquired the most powerful, complex brain on the planet, but the exact price of getting that brain was having the most unfinished, helpless infants on Earth.
The math of that trade-off is just fascinating. The human brain is so massive that if it grew to the same proportion as a chimpanzee's brain before birth, it would simply never fit through the human birth canal. So evolution had to compromise. Human babies are actually born with brains at only roughly 25% of their adult size. Compare that to a chimpanzee, which is born at about 40%. What that means is a massive 75% of human brain development has to happen after birth, entirely on the outside, while the infant is completely defenseless. It's not a design flaw, you know? It's just the biological reality every ancient mother faced in a world practically swarming with leopards and hyenas. So an infant that couldn't run, couldn't cling, and couldn't even stay quiet wasn't exactly a gift to a prehistoric tribe. It was a walking, or rather a crying, target. How did they survive? Well, anthropologists like Sarah Blaffer-Hrdy point to a really specific biological classification, which she details in her 2009 book, Mothers and Others. Unlike chimpanzee mothers who raise their offspring entirely solo and will actually attack others who try to touch their baby, humans are what biologists call cooperative breeders. We evolved to raise children as a group. And this wasn't just because it was a nice community-building thing to do, it was literally the only way to prevent our big-brained, helpless species from going entirely extinct. We survived simply because we shared the crushing weight of childcare.
And the sheer intensity of how we shared that weight is just staggering. Take the number 14, for example. Researchers studying the Ethi foragers in the deeply dense Ituri forest of the Congo found something amazing. A single infant is transferred between the arms of an average of 14 different people in just one 8-hour period. That means the baby is moved to a new pair of arms roughly 8 times every single hour. The mother holds the baby maybe 40% of the time, and for the other 60%, the infant is held by aunts, older siblings, grandmothers, neighbors. That baby is constantly, continuously held by the village.
And you know, this extreme proximity definitely extended to fathers too, hitting around 47%. Among the Aka people of Central Africa, anthropologists observed that fathers spend over 47% of their day within an arm's reach of their infants. And it's so important to understand here. These are not modern fathers performing some trendy new parenting style. These are men living the way humans lived for hundreds of thousands of years. The ancient biological norm was extreme, non-stop proximity. The baby was never alone, they were never put down on the ground, and they were never not touching somebody.
But all this constant holding created a brand new physical challenge. Remember how we said a baby on the ground was a dead baby? Well, when early humans became bipedal millions of years ago, when we stood up and started walking on 2 legs, we lost the thick body hair that other primate infants used to cling to their mothers. A human baby suddenly had absolutely nothing to grab onto. So early humans had to innovate. They started creating slings and carriers out of animal hides and plant fibers. And we actually have incredible archaeological proof of this, like a 10,000-year-old burial site in Italy where an infant named Neve was found buried with an intricately decorated baby carrier. Carrying babies wasn't just about getting from point A to point B. It was a vital piece of survival technology.
Which brings us to a frankly mind-blowing biological feature called the transport response.
Have you ever noticed that when you pick up a screaming newborn and hold it tightly to your chest, it suddenly calms down? It stops crying, its breathing stabilizes, its heart rate actually drops? We tend to think of this as just comforting the baby, right? But science tells us this is actually a 300,000-year-old piece of biological software wired directly into the human nervous system. It's a predator evasion reflex. Out in the wild, a crying baby attracts predators, but a baby that goes dead silent the second it's picked up, that baby stays alive. Your infant still runs this ancient software today. They feel like they're being carried to safety, so they go completely quiet to keep you both from being eaten.
Okay, so carrying them kept them safe from predators, but you still had to feed them. In hunter-gatherer groups, mothers breastfed for a minimum of 2 to 3 years and very often 4 years or longer. And again, this wasn't a modern lifestyle choice, it was an absolute life or death necessity. Breast milk was the only completely sterile, safe food available. It transferred vital antibodies in a brutal world with zero medicine. But crucially, round-the-clock breastfeeding did something else incredibly important. It suppressed ovulation. This was nature's built-in birth control. In the Paleolithic era, if you ended up with 2 highly helpless infants at the exact same time, your odds of losing both of them went completely through the roof.
But obviously, eventually, babies need more than just milk, right? And there were definitely no little jars of pureed carrots back then. So how did they transition to solid food? Through a fascinating and admittedly kind of messy process called pre-mastication. A mother or grandmother would take a piece of tough meat or a hard root, chew it up until it was totally soft, and mix it with their own saliva. Then they'd transfer it lip to lip directly into the baby's mouth. This passed along essential digestive enzymes and immune cells straight to the kid. In fact, lots of anthropologists now believe this saliva-sharing survival tactic is the actual evolutionary origin of human kissing. Not romance, just a mom doing literally whatever it took to keep her child fed.
All right, let's pivot to one of the most fascinating evolutionary puzzles in all of human biology. Why do human women live for decades after menopause? See, in the vast majority of the animal kingdom, creatures just die shortly after they lose the ability to reproduce. From a purely genetic survival of the fittest standpoint, there's no evolutionary reason to keep a body running once it can't pass on its genes anymore. Yet human women routinely live for 30, 40, even 50 years after their fertility ends. Why on earth is that?
The answer lies in what anthropologist Kristen Hawkes famously named the grandmother hypothesis. Back in 1997, Hawkes was studying the Hadza people of Tanzania, who are one of the last true hunter-gatherer groups on Earth. And she discovered something amazing. Postmenopausal women were actually among the hardest working and most productive foragers in the entire community. They spent hours under the blistering sun digging these really tough tubers out of the hard ground just to feed their grandchildren. Because the grandmothers were taking on this incredibly hard labor to keep the older children fed, the mothers were actually freed up to have another baby much sooner. It completely changes our entire perspective, doesn't it? As anthropologists point out, menopause is not a breakdown. It's actually one of the most successful strategies our species ever evolved. The human lifespan is as long as it is today because, 300,000 years ago, an older woman digging roots in the harsh African sun was the ultimate secret weapon against infant starvation. Grandmothers who helped raise their grandchildren successfully passed on way more of their genes, actively shaping the long, healthy lives we all enjoy today.
So as we pull all these pieces together, let's look at the massive paradigm shift between ancient survival and our modern life. For 300,000 years, nobody raised a child alone. The average ancient mother had a daily rotating network of anywhere from 5 to 15 people actively helping her carry, feed, and protect every single infant. Compare that to today's industrialized reality where that number of helpers has plummeted to maybe 1 or 2. Today, a parent might be sitting utterly alone in a dark apartment at 3 a.m. with a screaming infant and nobody is coming to take a shift.
Because of that, the absolute most crucial point I want you to take away from this explainer is this. The profound exhaustion and loneliness that modern parents feel, it is not a weakness. It is absolutely not a failure of character. It is simply the harsh biological friction of trying to do alone what your nervous system and your entire evolutionary history completely expect an entire village to handle. For the whole history of our species, the question was never whether one single person could raise a child alone. The answer to that was always no. The question was whether enough people cared enough to pitch in and help.
Which leaves us with this final start question to really reflect on. Are you trying to do alone what took a village for 300,000 years? Understanding our deep biological need for community doesn't just solve a cool historical mystery, it offers immense relief and validation for the real struggles we face today. We were built for connection, we were built for shared burdens, and we were built to survive together. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer.
Keep learning, keep asking those big questions, and I'll catch you in the next one.